Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. And in today's video I want to speak to you guys about the most recent patch notes. The guys have just finished their weekly state of the game, speaking about the changes to the PTS. Do bear in mind these patch notes are about the PTS, so it's from last week's PTS build to this week's. It's not compared to the live game, but of course do bear in mind all these changes are, with the intention of improving 1.4, which will eventually hit consoles. So, for the time being, that's what we're going to go through because there are some important changes here. Some updates to gear sets, some updates to skills, some kind of fixes to things that people had problems with last week. So most of it is pretty cool stuff. So if you do enjoy this, then like we super appreciate it. As always, any questions, drop them down below. But let's get started. So first things first, under the gameplay changes side of things, there were a couple of queries in last week's PTS. When the very first week came out, people were really happy with how the NPCs felt, the time to kill, the time to be killed. Last week there was a bit of a strange change where it took a bit of a step backwards, where time to be killed was fast again, time to kill was a little bit too long, so that was unintentional. They fixed that again. So this week, in the most recent PTS build, they have globally decreased the damage of level 31 to 33 NPCs by 15%, and they've globally decreased the armor of level 31 to 33 elite NPCs by 17%. So the end result is once again more in line with the 1 to 30 experience, so time to be killed is longer, time to kill is shorter. So that's a good change. They've also updated the way that NPCs react to player threats, which now allows more predictability with aggro. This is a really cool thing because basically since the game's come out, it's been really hard, if not impossible, to manage threat properly. If you want to tank, you can't reliably tank. You can't just say, put on a shield which is supposed to generate threat and just say, like all the enemies will attack you, because it just never worked that way. And that's been known since the beginning. So they're actually working to try and improve that and make it so that you can actually control that a bit more. So for those people that do potentially want to adopt a more tanky role, then that is possible. We'll speak more about that shortly because there are some skills that will effectively help with this. On top of that, the last thing under the gameplay changes is Reckless. The damage received from enemies debuff has been reduced from 15% to 10%. So it's still there, still does the same thing, it just provides a slightly smaller bonus. Now under the Search and Destroy side of things, Search and Destroy and high value targets, enemies in Search and Destroy missions will now be normal and veteran instead of mostly elite. They had a problem in the PTS where you're basically getting rushed by a ton of elites when it's only a Search and Destroy, when you're just gathering intel. Understandably, you'll get that when you do HVTs, but not when you're just gathering really simple intel. Plus, the weekly high value targets and high risk target missions will now scale according to group size. So if you are trying to solo it, it should be a lot more manageable than it has been in the past. Then moving over from there to gear stats. Now, we finally got a new perk for the Banshee 4-piece. You guys might remember that when I did the Banshee video last week, it had a perk where if you're not rogue, you move faster by 20%. It's really fun to use, but it unfortunately wasn't practical for the game. It just resulted in loads of streaming issues when loads and loads of people are running around fast. It causes issues with the game streaming, and it's just, in general, something that can't happen. So as nice as it is, it needed to be replaced. Now, we put forward some suggestions. The one they went with is, truth be told, I'm not too sure whether I like it, because it seems a little bit pointless. Basically what they've now done is that if you're not rogue, damage to rogue players is increased by 10%, that was the same as last week, but now also whilst not rogue and wearing the set, you don't lose any Dark Zone XP or currency when you die. Now, it's an interesting idea, because I can appreciate the sentiment behind it. It's similar to one of the community suggestions I put into last week's video, where one of the ideas being that if you're not rogue and you're being hunted, then there's a chance that you're being griefed, so you don't necessarily want to lose stuff. But let's be honest, the most important thing to you in the Dark Zone is your loot. It's not actually your currency, it's not your XP, because you don't lose that much XP and currency when you die anyway. Plus, currency and XP are not hard to come by. The thing that you're kind of most precious about in the Dark Zone, at least in my opinion, is your loot. If you have a really cool gear set piece and you want to get it out, and someone kills you, that's the thing you get annoyed about losing. You don't get annoyed about losing a few thousand credits, or a few thousand XP, or a couple of keys. You get annoyed about losing the loot. So, this doesn't really solve that problem, and in my opinion, I think it's a bit of a wasted talent. But that's what they've gone with for the time being. Definitely give some feedback, because obviously things are still in the PTS, so there may well be scope to change this. I was kind of hoping they would have gone more towards the whole sort of, constant pulse so you can track rogues, or maybe concealment from rogue pulses, something like that, but alas, this is what it's got. So it makes sense in the context of the set, because the set also provides you with bonuses to Dark Zone currency farming, and of course in 1.4, there will be value in having Dark Zone currency because there'll be more things to buy. So in that respect, it might be cool to not lose currency when you die, but still I do generally feel like this could have been a better talent. Either way, that's that. Now onto the weapon side of things, named weapons are no longer going to be locked to specific gear scores, except Damascus, which is the one that you get when you complete the final mission of the game. It's the blueprint for the sidearm, so that will stay the same. But otherwise, the world tier will determine the gear score of the weapon. So if, for example, you have something like Caduceus, one of my favourite weapons, right now in the current game it's 182, I think? 182 or 163, one of those two. But now in 1.4, if you obtain that weapon in a higher world tier, it will drop at a higher gear score. So if you do want to run around with a gear score 229 Caduceus, I'm assuming by these patch notes that that is going to be possible. Also, under the weapon side of things, they have just updated the patch notes literally while I was making the video, so thankfully I refreshed the page. Basically, Caduceus has now been changed. Unfortunately, it's now going to join the roster of useless named high-end weapons. The reason they're making the change, of course, is because in line with the new skill cooldown changes, Cool-Headed would just be ridiculously overpowered and would break the new cooldown system. So they had to replace it, but it's just a shame because that was kind of the sole reason for using Caduceus, especially in an Alpha Bridge build. It's basically my go-to build in 1.3. So alas, that is no more. Now Caduceus has Talented, Competent, and Determined. So Talented, killing a target with this weapon increases your skill power by 15% for 20 seconds. Competent, whenever you use a skill, your weapon damage is increased by 10% for 15 seconds. And Determined, where killing a target reduces your skill cooldowns by 7.5%. So that's what Caduceus looks like now. If any of you guys have been farming it because maybe you wanted to build an Alpha Bridge set, then I would just say stop, because you don't need to farm it. It's not a great weapon anymore, and until they do something with named high-end weapons, it's now joined the roster of not very exciting weapons. Also, all the named weapon blueprints have been removed from their sources. If you've bought them, they'll remain in your blueprints list, but they will only allow you to craft the weapon at the specific gear score. From now on, named weapons will either have to be acquired from loot drops or from vendors, so you won't buy a blueprint, you'll either buy the weapon itself, a la like the Historian, or you'll find it from a loot drop. So we're going to have to go and find some new sources for some of those weapons, but that is a change. The DPS calculation now values headshot damage differently from each weapon category, so they should try and give you a slightly more accurate guide when you're modding your weapons. And ammo capacity has been reduced by 25%, but that's a 50% increase compared to 1.3. Then moving over to skills. So they've improved the skill power diminishing return curve. So it basically encourages and rewards you more for specializing into electronics, because there was a kind of situation where last week if you spec too high, it just wasn't really worth it. So there still needs to be value in kind of, if you decide to go down that route, there needs to be some kind of reward for it. So overall, the skill specialist will now see an increase in the efficiency of their skills, but some skills have been adjusted because they became overpowered with really, really high skill power. Also, skill haste has now been capped at 60% to prevent the thing that we saw last week, where it was possible to hit 100%, or in fact above 100% skill haste, so that your cooldown was as short as 1 or 2 seconds. And also, all skills except for signature skills now have a 5-second minimum cooldown, so you can't just spam them endlessly, and of course that will probably extend to things like Cool-Headed for weapon talents and whatnot as well. So I'll be doing some testing on that next week once I pick up some more weapons, but either way, that is the change. As for specific skills, Sticky Bomb, for the base skill and all of the mods, the PvP modifier has been reduced by 51% from 90% to 44%, so that should probably try and remove or stop the whole kind of one-shotting Sticky Bomb scenario. Under the ballistic shield side of things, now this is super interesting. This is what I spoke about earlier about the whole kind of threat generation thing. So the base skill and all the mods, they've added threat generation when the shield is deployed. So this is what this skill was supposed to do way back when the game first came out. When I did my first tank build, like the sort of initial speculative tank build, this is how the skill is supposed to work. Just simply by holding it, you're supposed to generate threat. So if you're holding a shield and your teammates aren't, then the enemies should target you. So the fact that they've improved that, we'll now see. I'll of course test that this week, and I'll try and do sort of some tanking tests and whatnot. But that should now allow you to, especially if you're playing with a team, maybe you've got a lower gear scored partner, then you might throw on a shield so you can try and draw the aggro away from them. That's going to be a really useful thing. Also, they've added threat generation when shooting while the shield is deployed. So if, for example, just holding the shield isn't doing enough, then shooting the enemy should generate more threat, in turn bringing them your way. As for the base skill and the kinetic breaker mod, they've decreased the base health by 25% from 5,000 to 3,750. The reactive targeting mod, they've decreased the base health by 30% from 7,500 to 5,625, and the assault shield, they've decreased the base health by 30% from 3,750 to 2,812. As for support station, the base skill and all the mods, they've decreased the base cooldown duration by 44% from 90 seconds to 50 seconds. Scaling on cooldown with skill power has been set to 80%, and the ammo cache, the skill haste bonus, has been reduced by 70% from 50% to 15%. So again, that was one of the kind of contributing factors in people being able to exceed 100% skill haste. So again, with that dropping down, that should prevent that. Smart cover, this is also going to be a super interesting one. So the base skill on all the mods, except for Trapper, they've decreased the weapon stability and weapon accuracy bonuses by 7% from 7.5% to 7%. The Trapper mod, they've decreased weapon stability and accuracy bonuses and debuffs, as well as the damage resistance bonus and debuffs by 5%, so it's gone from 5.2% to 5%. For the Recharger mod, the skill haste bonus has been decreased by 25%, so it's gone from 20% to 15%. Again, that was also a contributing factor in the whole over 100% skill haste. And finally, Concealment, they've added a threat reduction mechanic when using this cover. So, again, if you're in a situation where you're trying to sort of like have a tank set up in your team, then it would be in your interest to have the tank run with shield to generate threat, and have other people run smart cover with concealment to further reduce their threat, which should in turn ensure that the attention is focused on your tank. As for Pulse Tactical Scanner, they've decreased the critical hit damage bonus by 20%, so it's gone from 10% to 8%, and Scrambler has also been given threat reduction when using the Pulse with this mod, so again, if you're running around and you're out in the open world, maybe you can't put down smart cover, then you can pop the Scrambler, and that also reduces your threat, so kind of useful. Seeker Mine for the cluster mod is decreased the duration of the bleed effect by 20% from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. And finally for mobile cover, the extension mod, they've added threat generation when using this cover, and countermeasure they've added threat reduction when using this cover. So again, depending on the role that you're playing in your team, and if you're trying to tank or you're trying to reduce threat, then use those accordingly. Finally, last couple of things, under loot and rewards, the open world named NPC's respawn timer has been reduced from 24 hours to 4 hours, so if you guys missed that, then basically the open world NPCs that they put into the kind of non-dark zone section where people could roam around and kill bosses for loot, they were on a 24-hour timer because they didn't want them to respawn too quickly, but they've now reduced that quite drastically to 4 hours. So every 4 hours, if you kill a boss, so if you kill Bullet King for example, he will spawn 4 hours later. Mission bosses, underground bosses, and underground chests, i.e. the end of phase and random chests, will now only have a chance to drop purple instead of high-end and gear set at normal difficulty in tier 1, and the hard difficulty and above in tier 1 as well as all difficulties at higher tiers will now guarantee high-end and gear set items. And then as for missions and incursion mid-bosses like the Four Horsemen in Dragon's Nest or Raptor and Domino in the General Assembly, they're no longer going to drop purple with a chance of high-end or gear set. Instead, they're now just going to drop 2 or 3 high-end crafting materials with a chance of high-end or gear set items. So basically, instead of purples, if you don't get the high-end or gear set items, you're going to get crafting materials, which is arguably more useful than purple items. And finally, under vendors and crafting, the Phoenix credit vendor has been removed from the tech wing in the base operations, and division tech has been removed as a requirement for all high-end and gear set blueprints. So it should make crafting a lot easier, which again is going to be useful because there'll be more blueprints in 1.4. So that, my friends, is pretty much it. There are, of course, a lot of bug fixes as well, so I will put the link to the patch notes in the description box down below if you want to read the bug fixes, but they are the main changes. So there are some interesting changes there. I'm definitely really keen to check out some of the new threat mechanics, because that's something that interested me right when the game first came out, but it obviously didn't work at the time, so if it actually works now, that could be a really nice new dynamic. So I'll definitely test that out, hopefully have a video on that at some point soon as well, but for the time being, thank you for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.